Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are through 6 days of training camp now, by my count. And it's at this point we want to take some time, take a look at what's going on over at the NovaCare complex. Next week is the last week of actual training camp proper before some preseason games get started. Normally it'd be around this time we start hearing the rumor mill of which players aren't going to be making the cut. However, as has been discussed before on the podcast and has been alluded to in other places, there is only one cut day. It is a couple of days following the last preseason game, one day that you have to get from 90 to 53. And as I'm looking and as I'm surveying all of the training camp news that's coming out from the beat reporters that are at media organizations that cover the team on a regular basis, what I'm noticing is that the Eagles are utilizing this as an opportunity to make sure that guys get enough reps so that way they have enough opportunity to evaluate them. So there's definitely been a lot of swapping around, definitely been a lot of pairing guys on the second team with guys on the first team, with guys on the third team, etc. Doing a little bit more plug and play than might have been the case in previous years, because in previous years there were staggered cuts where on one particular day you'd have to, by the end of training camp, you'd have to get down from 90 to 85, and then midway through the preseason there'd be another day where you'd have to get down from 85 to 80, and then what have you, following it down to the big cut day after the end of the preseason, bringing that down to the final 53-man active roster. This year, the NFL did away with those sort of staggered cuts, so there's right now a 90-man roster. That will be the roster going from the start of training camp until the end of the preseason. Once the preseason wraps up, the Eagles will make one big cut, and 37 players will see their status as an active member of the Eagles roster come to an end. The remaining 53 will become part of the active roster. That's been one of the things that I've been most curious about, how it's going to play out when it comes to the Eagles roster and how the Eagles are going to make evaluations and how the Eagles are going to utilize training camp. Based off of the reports that I have seen, it looks like they're doing a lot of that kind of plug and play and kind of mixing around, especially when it comes to some key positional battles. So that's really been sort of the biggest thing that I've noticed in terms of training camp as a whole. We also get to hear from the coaches every day. We get to hear from Nick Sirianni, from Sean Desai, from Brian Johnson. We got to hear from them over the course of training camp. And they've all shared some insights as to what they're looking at and shared some insights into players. The one thing that I'm really picking up, though, as we hear from, especially from Sirianni, is the big thing that they seem to be looking for is consistency. That adjective has come up time and again when it comes to the praise that these guys offer. The praise that seems to mean the most to guys like Sirianni is consistency. That's something that's been very, very evident when it comes to Jalen Hurts, who, according to all reports, has had an exceptional training camp. The speculation surrounding whether or not Hurts will have a 2018 Carson Wentz-like regression into 2019, 20, etc. I think right now we can put those rumors to rest based off of the reports that we've had, because Hurts has had really an exceptional camp. Through today, we are taping this on August the 4th, which is the conclusion of day 6 of the training camp. Through today, through the taping time today, Hurts has had only one interception over the course of the tenure, and that actually happened today. Hurts arguably had his worst day of training camp today. Certainly the interception didn't help. According to reports, again, out of the beat writers, particularly Brandon Galton over at SB Nation and Bleeding Green Nation, the report was that the interception itself was just one of those like last second heaves, kind of like a Hail Mary desperation kind of throw, and it was grabbed. A pick is a pick, however, and mad props to Darius Slay for the interception, giving Jalen Hurts a significant ding in his otherwise pretty good, again, pretty exceptional training camp. The other thing that occurred today, and this was something that came out of reports from multiple beat writers, was that Jalen Hurts kind of flubbed a big team drill where the Eagles were practicing end of game situations. And one of the things that happened was he was trying to get to the first down. He didn't, and he left the field with the rest of his teammates, but did not give the ball to the referees who were assisting at camp. And so because of that, that created problems where Sirianni now chewed him out because that was a game-losing decision for Hurts. Think like the final seconds of the game. So Sirianni chewed him out a little bit, and Hurts, after trying to explain himself, he wound up self-dealing out some push-ups just to sort of do a little bit of atonement for his sins on the field. Again, this was not typical of how his camp has gone, according to most reports. And Sirianni even addressed stuff like this, where you make decisions that you really like, you make throws that you really like, you make decisions in camp that you would like to have back, you make passes that you'd like to have back, etc. But the one thing that Sirianni has admired about Hurts, and that goes back to the theme that I had noticed, is the consistency that he is experiencing. That's kind of one of those things that you like to see. And he's even having an impact on other coaches. Certainly, Brian Johnson, the offensive coordinator, who was the quarterback's coach for all of Jalen Hurts' career here in Philadelphia, at least as the starting quarterback. Brian Johnson has been somebody who has known Jalen for a while. He addressed it on 94 WIP earlier this week, where he said there was actually a little bit of a gap when he was growing up, when he was playing, when Jalen Hurts' dad was actually the coach that Brian Johnson was on, and Jalen Hurts being around during the summer would often be around the football field. And then as Hurts grew, Johnson and Hurts had separated for a little bit, but when Hurts grew, Johnson was really, really impressed by Hurts when they got back into contact. When Hurts was about 15 years old, I think, was when they got back in touch. And has really followed Hurts and has really sort of developed that strong relationship that you would expect a coach to have. So Johnson is certainly very impressed. He alluded to that again earlier this week on 94 WIP. One of the things that surprised me a little bit was that Hurts also impressed Sean Desai, who is the defensive coordinator. Now, what caught me a little bit was a story that came out in the last couple of days where apparently Jalen Hurts actually went to Sean Desai's office around dinner time, and the two of them actually had conversation, and Hurts was asking him questions about why things are done and what have you. And that's one thing that Desai really made it a point to indicate. Desai said that being part of the organization now, because Desai is new this year as the defensive coordinator, being part of the organization now, you realize why a guy like Jalen Hurts is so special. We here in Philadelphia know, even just based off of last year, how special Jalen Hurts is as a quarterback, how elite he is, and it's looking now at this point in time like that consistency that is praised by Sirianni is going to launch him to that sort of that next level. He's that sort of next step that he's going to take in his career. There have been some injuries to contend with through camp, so I do want to just touch on them. The three people that have been limited throughout the predominant amount of camp have been Derek Barnett, who's been out with a knee injury. He's been out really since last year. The fact that he is back and limited and he's taken some reps, but not doing everything, certainly is a promising sign for him. So we're looking forward to seeing how that develops. Avonte Maddox has been out with a toe injury. He's been pretty present in camp, even though he's been limited. Hassan Reddick has also been limited for most of practice. He's been out with a groin injury. So those three, Barnett, Maddox, Reddick, those are the guys who have been limited. I don't really have a ton of concerns about them in terms of their injuries. We did have a couple of folks who have been out for injury more recently over the course of the last couple of days. Deion Kane has been out with an ankle injury. There's no indication really as to his status on that. He's been a non-participant in training camp for the last couple of days. In addition, two more ankle injuries have developed over the course of the last couple of days. Nakobe Dean, who is significant because he's the green dot. He is the middle linebacker. He's going to be the guy who the Eagles are going to be relying on to communicate play calls to the teams, make adjustments, show that leadership role on the defensive side of the football that the quarterback does on the offensive side of the football. Nakobe Dean has been out with an ankle injury. James Bradbury has been out with an ankle injury as well. These were all injuries that developed over the course of August the 3rd's practice, which at the time that we're taping this was yesterday. Nakobe's injury and James Bradbury's injury, those two injuries don't seem to be all that serious. In fact, Nakobe went over to the sideline and a member of the Eagles staff told Jeff McClain over at the Inquirer that he was fine. So the Eagles don't really seem to be all that concerned about Nakobe's injury. And it doesn't sound like they're all that concerned about Bradbury's injury. They're taking them day to day right now, according to official reports. So it is possible that those guys will be back soon. It's just a matter of time at this point. The one that developed today was a little bit more concerning, certainly at first. Linebacker Patrick Johnson has a leg injury. Initially, when he sustained the injury, it was possibly a knee injury, and so he was actually carted off the field, which you don't want to have. You don't want to have any injuries in training camp for the most part. Injuries kind of, for me, they skeeve me out a little bit when they occur during training camp because this is taking those final steps to get yourself into that football shape to be ready for week one. Missing time in training camp, not really all that great. Again, this looked more like a knee injury initially than a leg injury. Apparently, according to reports after the fact, there's still testing that needs to be done. But according to both Jeff McClain at the Inquirer and John Clark of NBC Sports Philadelphia, it is not a knee injury. It is a leg injury. And so because of that, it's actually a little bit less serious. And we're kind of hoping that Johnson, like Nakobe and James Bradbury, like those two guys, Johnson will be back in soon. So we'll see how those pan out. We will be monitoring the injury reports over the course of the next several days, and certainly we're monitoring the injury reports all the time. The other big thing is this is an opportunity, again, with the fact that there is only one cut day. This is an opportunity for as many players as possible to try and show their stuff, so to speak, and earn a spot on that 53-man roster because there's only one cut. So you're trying for that 53-man roster. You're always trying for the 53-man roster, but this year there's one day. There have been a few position battles. that have also you want to try to find try to get a sense of where those are going. One of the big questions was at right guard. There was question about even going back to the draft, there was question about whether or not the Eagles would draft somebody to fill in that right guard position. Obviously, they did not. And it looks like it is now Cam Jurgens at this point. Philly Voices Jimmy Kempski has actually officially called it for Cam Jurgens. He has taken all of the right guard reps at this point, reportedly, according to beat reporters. He has taken all of the right guard reps for the first team. So it's most likely that he's going to be the right guard. He is still technically the backup center too. So if Jason Kelsey needs to, for some inexplicable reason, take some time away from the field or he gets injured and what have you, Jurgens would be moving to the center role and there would be somebody else filling in at right guard. So technically Jurgens is still the backup center too. And that's good because according to reports, Brett Toth, who has been taking the second team center reps, was really not impressed. He's been not great in terms of snapping the football, especially when Marcus Mariota, who is the second team quarterback, when he's been lining up in the shotgun, those snaps have not been awesome. So apparently, Brett Toth is not doing so great, and it would probably be a good idea to count on Jurgens to be moving into that center, the second team center position. It makes sense, kind of, that Toth would be considered to be almost like a third stringer. We'll see how things pan out. One other thing to note when it comes to guard is that the Eagles guard, Josh Sills, has been on the commissioner's exempt list, the reserve commissioner's exempt list, basically since the beginning of February when charges were brought against him for rape and kidnapping. These charges were adjudicated over the course of the early part of this training camp. As of the time of this taping, which again is the evening of August the 4th, the jury has come back with an acquittal. So Josh Sills has been acquitted of the charges. The Eagles released a statement this evening indicating that they have been monitoring the situation. The NFL did remove him, according to the Philadelphia Eagles. The NFL did remove him from the commissioner's exempt list in light of the ruling. So Josh Sills will be returned to the active roster. He will become a part of training camp. So he will likely be, according to his lawyers, back in the Philadelphia area very soon. Quarterback 3, it seems to be Tanner McKee's at this point to lose. Ian Book simply has not impressed, certainly in the way that Tanner McKee has. Again, we're kind of vying for the bottom of barrel whose top is Jalen Hurts. There's going to be significant errors. There's going to be things that you wish you would have back. There's going to be those kinds of mistakes. But based off of what the reports that I have seen coming out of training camp from the Eagles beat reporters, looks like it's going to be Tanner McKee at the quarterback 3 position. Again, certainly hoping to see more insight into that, and we definitely want to see what's going on when it comes to the Eagles public practice, which is going to be, as of when we're taping this, this upcoming Sunday, August the 6th. So if you have not gotten tickets for that, by the way, tickets are available still. They are available online at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. They are just $10, and all proceeds go to the Eagles Autism Foundation, which, as we all know, does incredible work for those who are on the autism spectrum. So one of the other battles that's interesting and important is the safety battle. And at this point in the game, based off of the reports that are coming out of training camp from various beat writers, it looks like Reed Blankenship is going to be one of the two. Reed Blankenship has taken first team reps with all of the other guys that are in the running for this position. So Reed Blankenship is probably going to be one of your safeties one of the safeties for the Eagles this year. There have been a couple other people who have impressed, according to beat reporters. One of the surprises is that Kayvon Wallace, who last year was a special teamer, he has spent some time taking first team reps for safety, and Sirianni actually spoke to that a little bit earlier this week. He indicated that Kayvon actually earned those first team reps, and he says that's true of everybody. You earn your first team reps. Kayvon is somebody who he's done that. He has impressed on special teams. There was an opening at safety, and he earned the right to be in the mix. Remains to be seen who is going to take that first team safety position there. But the fact that they went out of their way, it sounds like, to include Kayvon in this because of how well he's performed on special teams and the fact that he, again, to quote Sirianni, earned the first team reps is important. Sidney Brown is also somebody who has made a significant impression, again, among the Eagles beat writers. Moving on to punter, which is a position that we desperately need help at. Siposs has been decent at best. He's been a very mid punter, and so has his competition, Ty Zentner. Both of those guys have been very mid, and that has been very evident over the course of training camp. They both did decently well in a coffin corner punting competition, but when it comes to the open air, when you're going for hang time, it's not been great. Jimmy Kempski of Philly Voice does unofficial statistics for hang time, and hang time is pretty much a little bit over 4.5 seconds on average, especially when we're going back to the days of Donnie Jones, where he had a monster of a leg and he was routinely hovering at about the 5-second mark. Special teams in general is a place where I am really hoping that there's going to be significant improvement this year because we really needed help. Special teams last year was really a weak spot. We all have the memory of the 65-yard punt return that set up a Kansas City touchdown in the Super Bowl. That really should not have happened. At the end of the day, really looking forward to seeing what happens with this punting battle. As of right now, based off of what I'm hearing, I'm not impressed. So, yeah, the reported stats stink. A couple other position battles to note is that, again, these are all reportedly coming out of training camp, but you can see videos and what have you. Olamide Zaccheaus versus Quez Watkins at the slot receiver. Probably going to lean more towards Quez here. Not only does he have the advantage of knowing the system, but he also, by all accounts, had a stellar day 3. So it remains to be seen. There's still some more practices left in training camp. And then we've got the entirety of the preseason to finagle and to monitor. But for the most part, I'm anticipating that Quez is going to have the slot receiver position. The other one has been linebacker. And if you are in competition for linebacker, so we've got Morrow and Nicholas Morrow and Christian Ellis. And if you are one of those two guys and Nakobe Dean goes down and you see Nolan Smith, who is not to this point in the running taking linebacker position or position reps, getting linebacker position reps, yeah, you are definitely concerned. So we'll see what happens. Again, I think a lot of why Nolan Smith got the extra reps at the linebacker position is really just because Nakobe Dean was down. And again, if you actually look at the roster, there's not a ton of depth at linebacker, especially at the off-ball position, which is where Nolan Smith was subbing in. There's not a ton of depth there, so it remains to be seen what's going to happen there. Realistically, at the end of the day, looking at the Eagles and looking at this particular battle, I think there's a slight edge towards Morrow based off of the reports that I'm hearing, but it's pretty close. A couple other notes. The Eagles were flagged for one of their favorite penalties in 2022, which is ineligible receiver downfield. That happened earlier this week. That needs to not happen. Like, they need to work out that kink now. They should have been spending a lot more time last year trying to get that resolved. That was a favorite penalty to be called against the Eagles. That was one of the Eagles' favorite penalties to commit. They committed that penalty 9 times over the course of the regular season in 2022. That was the last in the league in terms of that particular foul. Greedy Williams has had several pass interference penalties. This was noted by, again, at least 2 different beat reporters. Brandon Gouton over at Bleeding Green Nation, Jimmy Kempski over at Philly Voice, and it's been noted by others. There was one that was so egregious that 2 different referees threw their flags to call Greedy on the DPI. Last position I want to talk about today is running back. DeAndre Swift is impressing most of the running back core. He will probably wind up being the closest thing the Eagles have to a running back 1 this year. I am anticipating doing a running back by committee. I just am. I don't see a clear standout this as running back 1, but if there was going to be somebody who's closest to it, that is going to be DeAndre Swift, mostly because DeAndre Swift can catch passes as a running back, and he has shown that reportedly, again, according to Eagles beat writers, time and time again over the course of training camp this year. So he has been doing that. I do maybe anticipate that there could be a little bit of competition for punt returner. The chief candidate for that would be Britton Covey versus Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny actually did that a lot. According to Zach Berman over at The Athletic, Rashad Penny actually returned 7 punts for touchdowns. And again, we need all the help that we can get at special teams. So Rashad Penny as a running back, also having the ability to do this would be very interesting to see. And I would be very interested to see how that pans out. Especially when you consider that, again, according to a lot of Eagles beat reporters, Britton Covey has really taken some steps when it comes to especially creating separation from the defense. So he could possibly finagle his way into the wide receiver room, maybe as a backup wide receiver a little bit more regularly, or somebody that the Eagles can slot in certain cases. We'll see how that pans out. But focusing kind of more so on the running back, DeAndre Swift has been the guy who's been impressing. We know what we get in terms of Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. Rashad Penny said today that he's been working really, really hard with the Eagles training staff on how not to get injured, which is significant because Rashad Penny has missed almost as many games due to injury as he has played. The Eagles liked what they saw when he was in and when he was playing and when he was running. But he's also been very, very injury prone. And if he's going to have a shot at staying on the team, because this is a 1-year prove-it deal that he's basically been signed to, if he's got a shot at staying on the team, the Eagles are going to be looking for that specifically. So it'll be interesting to see there. And then the last person that I want to mention, because you can't mention the running back core if you're Nick Sirianni without mentioning Trey Sermon, is Trey Sermon. And that, again, goes back to something that we said even at the beginning of this episode. Trey Sermon was particularly praised by Sirianni for his consistency. Listening to what Sirianni has been talking about in press conferences, about what he is looking for and where our players shining, if you're being consistent, he's going to call that to the light. And that is certainly something that is heartening to see. So again, there were some other things that were mixed in there. His athleticism, his quickness, his physicality, all admirable traits, especially in a city like Philadelphia where we value physical play. But especially, again, consistency being such a high focus by Sirianni that he chooses to call this out for Trey Sermon is significant, and it's a sign of, I think, where Sirianni's mind might be going here. I'm not 100% sure. We have all of preseason still. We've got a couple of more practices to be able to address a lot of what's going on here. Sermon hasn't played a ton, but there's something in him, I think, that the Eagles like. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who are the Eagles players that you think have the biggest shot at making the roster? Who are the players that you're excited about going into the preseason, which is a week from this Saturday as we're taping this? Again, the Philadelphia Eagles will be having a public practice this Sunday, August the 6th. It's at 7 p.m. at Lincoln Financial Field. Tickets are just $10, and you can purchase them from PhiladelphiaEagles.com. All proceeds benefit the Eagles Autism Foundation. I'll be there from Bird's Nest Media, and I'd love to see you there. So if you're going, feel free to drop a note in the comments saying that you're going to be there. Can't wait to see you. Even if you can't be there, we will have an episode highlighting the public practice and the things that were seen and the things that were evidenced and what impressed and what didn't, and also some of your reactions. Again, I can't wait to hear from you. And thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Bird's Nest Podcast. You can always support the Bird's Nest Podcast and Bird's Nest Media by liking and subscribing on YouTube. And you can also find us anywhere that you get your podcasts: SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, you name it, it's there. You can also check out birdsnestmedia.com for some written content, and there's also a way to support us financially if you feel so inclined to do so. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Joe Donahue. Let's go Eagles.